Today we're going to take a look at using the foreach loop container to bring in multiple Excel spreadsheet files. And we're going to do this one at a time. The foreach will grab each file and then it'll import that data into a table for us. I created a database in my local machine here called multiple files and a table that matches the fields that are in the spreadsheet. So right now there's nothing in this table. We're going to import some data from one of the other examples. And we have these cities A, B, and C. The reason I named them A, B, and C is I only included cities that begin with an A, B, and a C in each file. That way we know after we import the data that all three files have been imported, because we should see A's, B's, and C's. So to start this, we're going to need a new SSIS project. And in the control flow, the first object we're going to use is the foreach. You'll notice that the foreach is a container. And there's a reason for this. This is for each item that is within the container, it's going to perform something. So in our case, we're going to grab each file, and each file will be imported into the table one at a time inside the foreach container. So double click on the top area here, and under the collection you'll see that they have an enumerator, for each item enumerator. If you click that, you'll get a drop-down box, and you can see there's a whole bunch of these different enumerators you can use. Variables can also be used as objects, SMO, ADO.NET. In our case, we're going to use the file enumerator. And down here it says, well, we need to find out where the file is located. Now this is actually going to end up being a variable. We're going to create the variable, and that variable is where the path is going to change for each file that's in the location. Now you don't have to do that. You can do this statically if you want to, but I think that using the variable makes more sense, especially if you're still learning how to use SSIS variables and parameters. Initially we're going to set a value here, and we're just going to assign that first letter A. We're going to assign the folder called import, and the files are XLSX. So let's check to make sure that's right, XLSX. There aren't any other files in there, but we want it to just grab the spreadsheets. The file name we want to retrieve is going to be the fully qualified, so the foreach is expecting the fully qualified path and file name. Now when you click on the variable mappings, this is where we're going to create a new variable, and we'll make this a package variable. We could actually put it in the foreach loop, but we'll leave it at the package level because we're also going to add a script task to this. The name will just be var file name. Namespace user is fine. I'll leave it as a string. This is going to end up being a path. So it'll be d:import in the file name. And the value doesn't need to be set right now. Click OK. So this is the variable that the foreach is going to use when it grabs the file name and then grabs the next one. This variable is what it's going to use to put that file path and name into. So we'll click OK. So to see this happen, I have a little trick here that I use to make sure that things are working, and I use the script task, and there's a little bit of C# code you put in here so we can have a pop-up come up whenever the variable has been set. So we're going to pass in the var file name we just created. and edit script. Visual Studio will open up again because it has to open a second copy of Visual Studio. It takes some more resources from your workstation. And we scroll down, you're going to have this section called Main. And right here where it says To Do, add your code. I'm just going to paste this here. We'll talk about it. So what I'm doing is I'm calling the message box object. This is the little box that pops up and it says something and it has like an OK button on it. So I'm just showing that, and the value I'm passing to it is the variable from our package that's called var file name. This is the one that the for each loop is using. And we're going to use the value of that and convert it to string. So the message box is going to pop up, and the value that we're going to pass to it is the string, which shows you the path location. So what we expect to see here is a pop-up box that shows us file A, file B, and file C each time we click the OK button. That tells us that the for each is working. So we'll save that and close it, and we can execute just the container. And here's our first pop-up. You see there's nothing to it, but it does have cities A in it. We should click OK and see cities B, and then again cities C. So the for each is working. It's grabbing each file one at a time. Now we have to do something with it. So I'm going to leave the script task in here for now, just for testing. And I'm going to go and drag a data flow. We need to use that spreadsheet reference and import the data from the Excel spreadsheet into the table. So we go into data flow and get our Excel source under other sources. And we're going to need a new connection manager. So for this first box, you're going to go ahead and put these values in here, but this is just to satisfy creating the connection manager. We're going to use the variable for the actual path name when it runs. Click OK. So this is tabular view, and the name of the Excel spreadsheet is sheet 1. And that needs to be the same for each one of these files, because remember, we're not changing the sheet name, we're only changing the file name. So each file needs to be the same structure. Click preview, and we see that there's the A city names. And go over to columns to verify we see everything's correct. Click OK. Now the Excel data source needs to go into the table in our database, so we're going to need an OLEDB connection. And that goes to our new database we just created. Which I hope I put on O2. Take our OLEDB destination, and we could have done this first in the reverse order. I just tend to create the connection managers first. Double click, and our connection manager is already in there as multiple files. Change the data access mode to the first one, tabular view. Fast load, I believe, will still work, but with the additional settings, I think there's something you have to tweak to get it to work. So the name of the table is city names. And we can view what's already in there, which is nothing. We go over to mappings, and it looks like one of mine is mistyped. Yep. So the state province ID, I forgot the ID, but that's okay. I'm going to put that under state province. So it'll import it into the state province field and I'll just have to rename that later if I actually wanted that to happen. And click OK. So at this point we can actually execute this package, but even though the for each loop is going to loop through those files, the Excel spreadsheet that goes into the table is actually only going to be the cities A. And that's because we set that up as the default when we set up the connection manager. Our connection manager needs to deal with the variable because that's the path for each file that the for each loop is stepping through. So if you right click and go to properties on our Excel connection manager, and then we go into the expressions, the little 3 dots next to it, click on property, and the Excel file path is what we're looking for. Go to the 3 dots on the right, and we're going to assign our var file name to that property. Now the Excel file path is going to change. It's going to use that variable instead of the setting that we added when we created the object. Now you'll see that we have an error. We got the little red X. The reason for that is that there's no value in the variable. So to fix that, we're going to right click and go into variables, and we're just going to assign the path to one of the files to the variable. So we'll go down here, and the value will be the first file of A. Okay, and we can actually preview that too. Now it should update that and get rid of the red X. Okay, great. So before we execute, we have one last step, and this is because of the Excel objects. Under configuration properties and debugging, the default is to run it at 64-bit runtime. We need to change this to a 32-bit, and this is basically because I have the Microsoft Access objects installed on this workstation. Well, those objects or that executable has to be a 32-bit because the 64-bit doesn't work well with SSIS. So we need to turn off 64-bit, so the package should run as a 32-bit. So now we can try executing this and see that we go through each file. The script task should give us a pop-up for each file just before it inserts it into the table. There's the first one, cities A. Click OK. Cities B and cities C. So let's check and make sure that all A, B, and C were imported into the table. And as you can see, that was successful. The A's, the B's, and the C's were imported. I actually have an ID field, an identity field on here, so to make each record unique. If we go back to our package, the script task is not necessary, but because there isn't an easy way to view what the for each loop is doing, that's why I insert the script task. Now to automate this and add it to a job, you can't have something that's doing pop-ups. So what you could do is disable it, or you can just frankly delete it completely and just have the for each loop with your data flow task. So this was importing multiple spreadsheets using the for each loop container into a SQL table. I hope this helped you out. Please like and subscribe below, and thanks for watching.